A couple months ago, I watched one of the more recent PewDiePie videos. It was his book review. And in that book review, he basically was talking about some philosophy books he's been picking up a couple, like this past 12 months. But he kind of just said, hey, I'm reading these books from month to month, and maybe you could pick them up too. So he basically said, oh, in this month you're going to read this book, and the other month you're going to read this book. And I could just getting into the habit of reading and philosophy and liking philosophy. And the first book he assigned, I've been having it for on my shelf a couple months, reading it a little bit, but never really fully internalized or tried to analyze it up until now. And that book is Tao Te Ching, the Tao Te Ching in all his glory. This book is a good old introduction on Middle Eastern philosophy. It can appear very nebulous in its own conception, since we don't even know if Lao Tzu, the writer of this book, the maker of this book, was even a real person to begin with. It's a very short precept book. It has like 81 precepts. Anyway, this book establishes what is called the Tao. And the practice of Taoism, which is following and according with the Tao. A philosophy so contrary to popular Western beliefs that it'll leave you mind-boggled as to why you never thought of this before. To clarify, though, that Tao is not a religion or a dogma. It's not like Christianity, Judaism, Islam, that we have to go into strictly ritualized practices. It is a practice, but a more of a practical one, in the sense that it's very based in how to live and govern ourselves. It's a very political and personal book. And these social political roots that this book is ingrained with go back to feudal China, and how in that time Lao Tzu told us to live according with the Tao in that concept and time, in that context. But you'll see in this video that the Tao in itself is something that we can all apply in our daily lives, no matter the different contexts, social, political, economical. It's a universal law, a universal concept, a universal way and constant. So I understand that kind of makes you feel like, what the fuck is he on about? Like, this feels so ambiguous for no reason. The Tao in itself is translated in English as the path or road. In other words, it is roughly an inexhaustible resource that we should all follow despite the doctrine or religious belief we have, in order to attain peace and happiness through ourselves and our alignment with life in the present moment. I'll be covering the core concepts of the Tao, but first of all, I want to talk about how I feel about it, how it makes me feel, and how my experience can not shape your experience, but kind of make you maybe understand a little bit more in what the fuck I'm talking about. If you want to skip through this part, that's fine. I can put like a little tag putting like, oh, my experience, I wrote a little statement here, a little paragraph. I'm going to read it to you. I was kind of drunk, so, maybe it doesn't make any sense, but, fucking dogs, I swear to God. The Tao is great. It is great because it feels limitless, yet empty. This book changed everything. First, it is important to understand that the Tao is not a concrete. It is the following of one's own intuitions and embracing of fluidity and flexibility of one's actions, despite one's doctrines or religions. It is simply the effortless pursuit of peace of mind, presenced through one's actions. Some people call it the Tao, inner peace, God, etc. It is for everyone, as it doesn't reject anyone. This makes me feel at home, and many others I'm sure it does too, as it clearly is for everyone. In accomplishing one's own goals, it is important to practice one's own presence in the now, and view the goals or desires as part of one's own journey into the bliss of life instead of depending on it for happiness. It's about putting in the work to let go and de-learn rigidness, strict concepts of one's own future, and letting it all go as one learns it all along the path of the Tao. But what is the Tao? Tao, for me, strictly enough, is itself the practice led by one's own intuition in rejecting of Western beliefs of rigidness and sheer brute force through everything. Instead, it offers us to retreat into one's own mind, something so powerful that it can determine everything for us. In this case, if you want to learn or change the world, work on yourself. If you want to be happy, work on yourself. If you want to achieve your goals, seek to work and let go of yourself. This is the Tao. It's about taking action, but retreating and observing for one's own movements to know when to take action. action but based in intuition, softness, and free of desperation and rigidness. This whole mumbo jumbo seems pretty in concept. What about practicality? How do I apply this in my life? That's where I'm going to talk about the core concepts. Well, good question, my dear little Sigma. I wrote this when I was drunk. Leave me alone. When I'm about to use myself as an example, mostly because of all of you who are watching, I'm also learning. I'm very new to this concept. We are all in this Western society that teaches us to work hard and sheer brute force through everything, and not one for one moment embrace our own intuition. So it's definitely something that you can learn immediately. It's something that takes time, patience, and like all in life, if you're willing to commit to it, then you're gonna be fine. So yeah, core concepts. Wu Wei. I'm sure all of you guys have heard Wu Wei. It's a very famous concept, or flow state, flow action, doing, not doing. I'm gonna reference chapter 43 as kind of the thing to start on, since maybe you'll understand a little bit more when I talk about the chapter and also give context to the chapter and what it's trying to say. So yeah, chapter 43. The softest in the world surpasses the hardest in the world. What has no substance can penetrate what has no opening. Thereby I know the value of non-action, the value of teaching without words, and accomplishing without action is understood by few in the world. So, the first concept, Wu Wei, is often described as doing without doing, or action through non-forcing. It refers to acting without overthinking. It is an instinctive, meditative action rooted in one's own intuition. You can reach Wu Wei by rejecting rigid, fixed concepts of what we should be doing. It involves letting go of external voices and judgments, accepting an open mind, and acting based on a present moment, in the outcomes that naturally arise from it. So, for example, I'm going to talk about the time where I was working. I work every weekend, but so one of these days I come from work and home. I came home and I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a ton of these things. Like, I'm going to do a lot of homework after work, and I'm also going to work out, and I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to do all this and this and that. As soon as I got home and I ate and showered, I was so tired. The sleep deprivation was just building in me, which is another thing, that I'm gonna get into shortly. And my body was telling me to go sleep, to rest, to recuperate that energy for another day. But that rigid form of thinking was, you need to do this. If you don't do this consistently, it means you're mediocre. It means you don't get results. It means you're giving up too easily. It means you don't know how to resist uncomfort, or how to resist when you're tired. Just tell me to do the opposite, just force it, to brute force it. Obviously, those who stay late doing homework understand eventually that staying late and doing homework to wake up early isn't really gonna give you more energy. It's going to exhaust you on the long run, and the real solution is going to sleep early and waking up early so you can have more energy during the day. It's rejecting that sort of brute force thinking of doing everything perfect and forcing through everything through brute force to get results, when in reality you need to learn when to step back, which is the core of what Wu Wei is. It involves letting go of external voices and judgments, accepting an open mind, and acting based on a present moment and the outcomes that naturally arise from it. So, for now, it is important to keep in mind that when I speak about Wu Wei, I mean an action taken from a soft sense of focus, soft sense of compassion, soft sense of perception, genuine curiosity, not, for example, fear. So, when I was thinking, I really should do this, I really should do that, instead of going to sleep, I was acting out of fear. I was afraid that I just wasn't ever going to get the job done, or that I was never ever going to build that discipline, or that I was lazy. And acting out of fear really is just setting us up for failure. So it's rejecting that fear of failure, fear of the results. And instead of resisting change or an opposing force, you adapt to it. In the Tao Te Ching, Water is referenced a lot in the book, as a way of the closest natural resource in the world that adapts and is closest to the Tao. Tao in itself is a movement, a flow of life that adapts to its surroundings. The water adapts to its surroundings and goes to the lowest places, no matter of what people will think of it. When a rock is in the way, it doesn't sheer brute force to it, it merely adapts to it. So kind of resisting and trying to brute force through everything when we know internally that we need to rest is not the way to go. Obviously, in this example of practicality, in the long run, you're just gonna feel more tired, and you're not gonna have energy for you to do work. You need to learn. It's about learning when to work and when to step back, and you learn that. You learn when to know when to step back and when to work by listening to yourself and trusting in yourself and trusting in the Tao. Trusting in the Tao is trusting in your own intuition and what your mind without tells you, and to differentiate the voice that, because there can be a lot of voices in your head telling you to do this and do that, and you need to differentiate what voice to listen to. You need to view, where does that voice come from? Is it a judgmental voice? Is it an aggressive voice? Or is it a soft, intuitive, kind of intuitive voice that tells you that you need to do this because you feel like this? Like you need to rest because you feel tired. And it is not the time to work. Another example, just to close this on a more refining concept of what the effortless action is. I remember the other day a friend of mine, we hadn't talked in a while, and they were talking to me and just kind of venting about their problems in life and their tribulations and trials. And I feel like a lot of times as people, when we listen to people talk and grieve through the way they talk about their problems, our first instinct is just to talk over them and to just tell them what to do, because we think we know what's best for them. When in reality, the only person in the world that knows what's best for themselves is ourselves. Is you. It's me. It's in this case, I know what's best for me, and you know what's best for you. It's just that we don't listen to our body. We don't listen to what our mind tells us. So I feel like a lot of times the answers lie within, not outside. And that's something that Wu Wei teaches us very strictly, and the Tao in itself teaches us very strictly. So it was my first instinct to just talk and say, oh, I think you should do this. I think you should do that. But instead of doing that, I just let her talk. And talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And, I let them understand, and just, it was kind of beautiful in the sense that I could see how they just let themselves feel it, let themselves understand and process the emotion, and know what they had to do. They knew what they had to do. They know what they had to do to end their suffering, to process things better, for that thing to not happen again. But I didn't have to say anything. They knew that. So it's about understanding when it is the time to let go and to act. So yeah, sometimes we need to understand that obviously just because we feel a certain way doesn't mean we're just gonna lay back. No, you don't have to feel passion and creativity all the time when recording videos, for example, or making art or working. Sometimes you have to work out of necessity. Sometimes you have to do some stuff that you don't necessarily want to do. But it is important to practice presence and know one's own body. How can I tell you when to act and not act? I can't. You have to tell that. You have to differentiate that yourself. You have to differentiate from within. Sit down with yourself and differentiate what is laziness and what is preservation. What is healthy for you? What is healthy for you to rest? What is healthy for you to work and put your body to work and put your mind to work? So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. The second concept, and one of my favorites, is the uncarved block. I'm gonna reference reference chapter 28. So yeah, know the male, but keep to the role of the female, and be a ravine for the world. If you are a ravine for the world, then the constant virtue will not desert you, and you will again return to being a babe. Know the white, but keep to the role of the black, and be a model to the world. Then the constant virtue will not be wanting, and you will return to the infinite. Know honor, but keep to the role of the disgraced, and be a value to the world. If you're a value to the world, then the constant virtue will be sufficient, and you will return to being the uncarved block. When the uncarved block shatters, it becomes vessels. Master makes use of these and becomes the lord over the officials. Hence, the greatest cutting does not sever. So, this all seems kind of ambiguous. The book in itself can be a kind of ambiguous sometimes. So I understand if you were reading this with me and you were like, what the fuck is he talking about? I get it. The uncarved block in itself represents the unlimited potential that comes from letting go of rigid labels and fixed concepts that we impose on ourselves. Ideas about who we should be, who we shouldn't be, how things should be, how things shouldn't be, or how situations should turn out. It is about simply accepting that we are unlimited beings, capable of many possibilities, and we should maintain an open mind rather than clinging to fixed outcomes or identities. This concept is closely related to Wu Wei, and you'll see that a lot of these concepts are very related and kind of the same in a sense. I'll explain that more towards the ending of the video as to why these concepts are kind of more abstract and kind of relating to each other. So, we are unlimited beings capable of many possibilities, and that we should maintain an open mind rather than clinging to fixed outcomes or identities. We live in a world that is so obsessed with labels, obsessed with classifying, so obsessed with classes, poor, rich, man, woman. You know, we live in a very, especially for people of third world countries, we live in a world that is sexist, racist, and classist. Is that the word in English? I'll if it isn't, then I'll edit it out or something. Outside of political, social manners, I mean that we should transcend these labels. Instead of thinking that I can't do this because this and this and that, I can't do this because back in the day this happened to me, I can't do math because I'm just never good at math and I had a really bad experience at math when I was a child and this and that. You have to understand that these things are just labels. You know, no one was born being something they were not. You know, we learn things and we nurture them, and whatever we give our attention to and whatever we farm and give water and food to will grow. So if you give food and water to thinking that you're not enough, you're pathetic, that you're incapable of socializing, that you can't have a lover, that you can't be rich or famous or be intellectual or be good at what you do, then it'll grow and you'll start believing it so hard that it's going to be extremely difficult for you to leave that label. The uncarved block represents having an open mind and understanding and loving ourselves and knowing that we are capable of unlimited potential. We are capable of doing unlimited things in this world, and the only thing that stops us is our labels and staying so rigid with fixed outcomes of what we should do. A person who has fixed outcomes on life and thinks that they should do this, then do that, then do this, and it'll equal this and this and that. A lot of times, plans in life are outside of our control. And what really gets us to the point where we want to go is not really sticking to a plan, because plans change. You can't just have a perfect plan and you think it'll work out from A to Z. No, things change. Difficulties arise, obstacles arise, and it's part of the journey. So you have to learn to adapt, in that sense, following Wu Wei and not having any fixed plans. So there's going to be stuff you're going to be picking up newly. There's going to be stuff that you're going to be learning new that you didn't think you were going to learn, but you have to be open to them. You know, you can't just reject stuff because you don't think it accords to your plan. you have to keep an open mind, because you never know what secrets, what fruits life will hold out for you. And to understand that labels are just a concept created by society. We are not our labels. We are so much in our labels. We are infinite. I want to be a filmmaker. I do films. I make movies, and I'm studying that. And I also want to sort of make money as a photographer. I'm a professional photographer, and I'm still yet to really find that many success in it, to be honest. But that doesn't mean that I'm just not a good photographer, that I suck at photography, or that I can't be a photographer, or that I can't make money out of a photographer. It just means that you have to keep going. And you have to embrace that the possibility of, maybe you can be a photographer. What if a path opens up for you to do something else? And a lot of times we have to understand that in this journey of doing different things to achieve our goals, we have to embrace different capabilities, because I wanted to be a photographer, but I don't want to run a business, and I think, I can't run a business, I'm bad at it. When in reality, if the opportunity presents for it, you have to learn, and you have to maintain yourself an open mind for it, and reject that sort of label that you just can't do it, because you definitely can. It's all about mentality. That's the point I want to bring across here. So reject labels, reject fixed outcomes, and reject fixed identities of who you are, because we always change, and whether you like it or not, you're gonna change. So yeah. Whew, that was a long one. Yeah, but yapping a lot. I want to talk about the mysterious virtue. Mysterious virtue. I'm gonna use chapter 51 as an example. Here we go. The way gives them life. Virtue rears them. Things give them shape. Circumstances bring them maturity. Therefore, the people all revere the way and honor virtue, yet the way is revered and virtue honored, not because this is decreed by any authority, but because it is natural for them to be treated so. Thus, the way gives them life and rears them, brings them up and nurses them, brings them to fruition and maturity, feeds them and shelters them, gives them life, yet exacts no gratitude. It is the steward, yet exercises no authority. Such is called the mysterious virtue. This virtue, the mysterious virtue, is manifested through intuition and compassion. It is rooted in intuition rather than intellect or rational calculation. It is goodness for the sake of being good. The mysterious virtue emerges from Wu Wei and all these other concepts like the on-card block, because when we act intuitively and without force, we naturally cultivate this deeper form of virtue. This virtue is not about acting well for personal gain, not to maintain an image or meet others' expectations, or not to impress anyone. It is about being simply good because it is good to be so. Pure, unforced empathy and kindness. A lot of people want to be better. A better people, a better person, and a lot of people think being a better person is about following this 1, 2, 3 step rule set that we have to follow. Well, it isn't so. I feel like a lot of people, and I want to say a lot of people, I want to bring myself to, a lot of people act good because out of their own self-interest, and I'm not saying that as a bad, it is bad, but it happens to everyone. We're so ingrained and groomed to think that we need to get something in back for us to do something, A lot of times we can act out of personal gain, out of approval of others, out of impressing someone, out of feeling good. That's a selfish. Those are selfish desires for us to be good. And the mysterious virtue is something that we cultivate through, obviously, the Wu Wei, but also intuitively thinking. It is something we cultivate through our own curiosity. So, when I said that non-action, Wu Wei, flow state, whatever the fuck you want to call it, is cultivated through intuition and simply having this own curiosity that is not aligned with fixed concepts like approval or fixed outcomes. Mysterious virtue works in a similar way, that we act out of kindness for the sake of being kind, because you relate to the person or you understand how they feel and you want to be there for them. So an example of this was I watched a YouTube analysis video out of this book, like analyzing each chapter, and he analyzed it beautifully. Like, it was an example he stated, but I'm gonna show it like here, or here, the video. I forgot the channel name, but a man loses his wife, or a man loses his job. For example, he loses his job and he has 3 friends. First friend tells him, "Oh, I can't come over, I'm too busy." Second friend is like, "Oh, that's so horrible, let me set up a fundraiser and get yourself some money and some food and some things, and sends up a whole fundraiser for the people of the community, of the street, to help them out." And the third friend arrives in his home. "Hey man, you wanna drive around, have a walk, get some food?" And ultimately enough, that third friend is what is the example of the mysterious virtue, because you can act out of kindness, but a lot of times you can think, "Oh, you want to follow a strict moral code," or "Oh, you want to do this out of thinking or validating that you're a good person." But a lot of times, true kindness arrives from love and from genuine love and empathy for the other person. It is not a transactional act. It is an act that transcends all transactions and you give me and I give you sort of interaction. It is irrational and at the same time not practical. So in the case of being kind, it is about cultivating or listening to our intuition, and listening to our intuition opens us up to be more empathetic. And yeah, if you act out of interest, a lot of times the emotion that gives you interest can be easily be overcome by another emotion. If you want to steal something because you're courageous and you have the balls to do so, you're gonna do it. But if the person who you're stealing from pulls a gun out of you, you're gonna start running because you don't want to die, because that sense of that fear of losing your life will overcome that courage. So it is something that is very subject. When you act out of interest or act out of non-kindness or not following that virtue, that emotion that you're doing, for example, I'm gonna help this homeless person out because people will think better of me, that emotion can be easily overcome by another. It's something that is subject, So if you act out of love is more powerful than anything, and empathy. And like I said, you cultivate that through listening to yourself, intuition. So yeah, it's not easy. Definitely not easy, and I've also struggling to master it. It's something that takes time. So this concept in itself, in carved block and Wu Wei, is something that relates in kind of very similar way to everything. So Wu Wei, through Wu Wei, we achieve the uncarved block, and the mysterious virtue is something we cultivate through the Wu Wei. So they're all related. They're not different. They're not isolated concepts. Okay, so the 3 treasures, chapter 67. Oh my god. Okay, this is the chapter. The whole world says that my way is vast and resembles nothing. It is because it is vast that it resembles nothing. If it resembled anything, it would, long before now, have become small. I have three treasures, which I hold and cherish. The first is known as compassion. The second is known as frugality. The third is known as not daring to take the lead in the world. In being compassionate, one would afford to be courageous. Being frugal, one could afford to extend one's territory. Not daring to take the lead in the empire, one could afford to be lord over the vessels. Now, to forsake compassion for courage, to forsake frugality for expansion, to forsake the rear for the lead, is sure to end in death. Through compassion, one will triumph in attack and be impregnable in defense. What heaven succors, it protects with the gift of compassion. Lastly, the three treasures of these principles, especially Wu Wei, are easier to practice when we cultivate these three treasures. So, for example, when I know the words that are used are kind of like weird, but the three treasures in itself are compassion, moderation, and not placing oneself above others. So, through practicing the three treasures, we can recognize moments when we are centered and acting from a meditative presence, and moments when we notice ourselves becoming decentralized, moments that signal the need to step back and re-centralize. So, returning to these three treasures, it's all about compassion. For example, this is the first one: being gentle with ourselves and with others, acting from kindness for its own sake without self-interest, just as mentioned earlier. Moderation, this is not simply restraint but simplicity, knowing when it is time to stop. Once again, this ties back to the idea of being centered, knowing when it is time to act and when it is time to yield. This discernment is cultivated through Wu Wei. Through Wu Wei, we learn when it is time to move forward and when our body and intuition tells us that it is time to step back and allow things to resolve themselves naturally. Not placing oneself above others relates very closely to power and ego. This desire to be better than others or to stand above them, it feeds arrogance. To practice not placing oneself above others is to cultivate humility. In Taoism, in particular in the Tao Te Ching, there's strong emphasis on leadership, on how one should govern, lead, or influence others. True leadership, according to Taoism, is rooted in service, being willing to help others and understanding that we cannot stand above people if we wish to serve them well. We must be willing to understand or to stand below them in order to be a positive influence. So this is in itself the main three things to cultivate that will breed essentially Wu Wei, the mysterious virtue, and the young carved block. There's a ton of other concepts in the book, but for me, these are the ones that I'm gonna put. I put these in the video because they're the most important ones, and they're kind of the foundation for them. Compassion, like I said, being gentle and kind with ourselves and others, because we love ourselves and others. So in it of itself, something I forgot to mention, by loving ourselves, by loving us, by loving myself, we are more capable of loving others. If we hate ourselves, we can only love others to the extent of how little we love each other, ourselves. So another practical way of cultivating the sense of compassion or the mysterious virtue is essentially to love ourselves. How do you practice loving yourself in the context of the Tao? Well, you listen to yourself. Journal. Write about what you feel, how you feel it, why you feel it. What are your goals? What are you going to do? Why do you feel like you're not good enough? Where does that come from? So it's about analyzing ourselves. In the book and in life in general, it mentions a lot about if you want to change the world, you need to change yourself first. So in this context, it's all about kind of being gentle, soft. When I'm focusing, also being soft and trusting ourselves. Moderation in itself is just another word for simplicity. Right now, I have a mess in my room. Like, I have way too much shit that I don't even use. And I'm planning on making another video, basically vlogging about that, because I have way too much stuff, man. Like I'm not even gonna lie, like way too much stuff. In practicing simplicity, one could, for example, in my case, clean my room, take out stuff, sell stuff, that I don't use. Because in excess, there's nothing good in excess. And in Wu Wei, in the Tao in itself, it is important to know when to stop. So knowing when it's too much in my room, is just filled with too much stuff, is also another way of knowing when to stop. For example, eating. Excessive eating, knowing when to stop eating, because too much of one thing, too much of a good thing is not more of that good thing, it turns into a bad thing. So excessive eating basically can be another way of excess. And knowing when to stop is knowing when to stop eating, and when to listen to ourselves and know, hey, I like eating, but also I need to love myself and treat myself better, for I know when to stop. Same thing with greed and money. So all these excesses are sort of like addictions, and they can be bettered and worked and known when to stop and moderate ourselves through listening to ourselves, through working with ourselves. And moderation in it of itself is achieved through compassion and work. So, like I said, it's cultivated through Wu Wei. We learn when it is time to move forward, and when our body and intuition tells us it is time to stop and step back. You can only tell this yourself. You can read all this to understand, it'll point you to the right way, but in reality, you need to learn to sit with yourself and know when it is time to stop. When have you been excessive? When it's too much? This book is about leadership. The main focus of this book is about leadership over yourself and others. So it is important to know that the third secret treasure is one of the most important. Not placing oneself above others. Relates closely to power and ego. And even if you're a good person, there's a ton of people who cultivate kindness, who do good actions, but think they're better because they do good actions. They think they're better because they practice the Tao. They think they're better because they have more money. They think they're better because they're more creative. They think they're better because they cultivate more positive qualities. But that's the trap. It's very easy to get stuck in this trap of thinking you're just better than someone because you cultivate and do these things that are good for your other self and others. But in that comes arrogance. So it is important to know that you need to also know when to stop and cultivate this sense of love for others, and understand that just like you, they were also in that position. So in terms of being a leader, and when I say being a leader, it's if you have a sister, a little brother, you are already a leader figure for them in your life. So it's not something that applies strictly to politics. We are all leaders, whether we like it or not. In being a leader, we need to be willing to serve and listen, willing to help others and know and understand, and have those necessities that they have and take them as our necessities, because the necessities of the few are the necessities of the many. The problems of the few are the problems of ourselves. So we must be willing to stand with them in order to help them, instead of trying to force our way in, instead of trying to order our way in. We need to listen and serve. So yeah, those are the main concepts of the Tao Te Ching. I want to finish with chapter 1, and very simple. Very simple chapter. I promise I won't be talking for much after this, but chapter 1. The way that can be spoken of is not the constant way. The name that can't be named is not the constant name. The nameless was the beginning of heaven and earth. The named was the mother of the people. Hence, always rid of yourselves of desires in order to observe its secrets, but always allow yourself to have desires in order to observe its manifestations. These two are the same, but diverge in name as they issue forth. Being the same, they are called mysteries, mystery upon mystery, the gateway of manifold secrets. So I want to conclude the chapter with chapter 1. The purpose of this chapter is to remind us that following the Tao is not about rationally or intellectually explaining it to fully understanding it through concepts. Rather, it is about embodying it through action or non-action, doing or not doing, as lived experience in our daily lives. In other words, the less we talk about the Tao, the more we understand it, and the more we try to explain it, the further we move away from it. Very easy to intellectualize the Tao, to turn it into a system, a philosophy, or even a kind of science that must be followed, but the Tao is not a science. It's a way of life. It's living. In life itself, it is constantly changing, fluid, and adaptable, like water. This is why the Tao Te Ching begins by telling us that the Tao can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The words that we speak of the Tao, the practicalities that I just spoke right now, are just scratching the surface. Words are not enough to describe how to live life in a calm and peaceful manner, how to live the Tao. What describes the Tao in its fullest potential is our actions, how we embody it, or non-actions. Like I said, the teachings and precepts of this book are not the Tao itself. They are guidelines, signposts that point us in the right direction so we may glimpse the Tao for ourselves. Because of this, the Tao must be approached with wonder and curiosity, much like a child exploring the world for the first time. We must re-centralize ourselves and return to the state of openness, free from rigid expectations and fixed conclusions. This practice can take many forms, through action or non-action, through meditation, through spending time alone with ourselves, even when it feels uncomfortable, through choosing presence over doing, and through letting go of our obsession with how things should turn out in the future. Ultimately, following the Tao is not about control or certainty, it is about learning how to move with life as it unfolds. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. So, I close with this. Don't try. Do it. Don't explain it. Do it. So, it is about transcending words. It's about transcending explanations. You don't need to explain anything to anyone. You don't need to correct anyone. They don't matter. What matters is how you embody it. How you become this calm, compassionate, kind-hearted as a grandmother sort of person. And the more you reject, the more you let go of wanting to prove something to others, or wanting to prove something, or wanting to explain something, the more liberated we are. So it is about letting go of letting go of attachments to results, being kind, letting go of labels and fixed concepts, knowing when to stop, serving others, putting their necessities above yourself, and moreover, just practicing it and working on yourself and loving yourself as you love others. So yeah, that was the Tao Te Ching. I keep fucking stopping every time I say Tao Te Ching. This is the Tao Te Ching. Probably gonna cover the other books, but I've been recording for almost an hour. Look at that. So yeah, this is gonna be quite a hefty thing to edit. See you guys later.